So welcome to another episode of Bitcash Breakthrough, your gateway to digital wealth, where we delve into the dynamic world of blockchain technology and its ground tech applications. Today, we're thrilled to have Rob Konsdorf, also known as Rodrigo, as our guest. Rob is a co-founder of Detroit Ledger Technologies and Facings, and a prominent member of Bitshares, Steem, and Antelope communities. Since diving into the blockchain space in 2014, Rob has dedicated his career to advancing blockchain technology, focusing on its capacity to revolutionize industries through decentralization. In 2017, Rob shifted to working full-time on blockchain, channeling his efforts into promoting and developing decentralized networks. He's currently spearheading Facings, a no-code NFT launchpad that simplifies the process of launching NFTs, making it accessible for creators and businesses eager to leverage NFTs strategically. Join us as we explore Rob's journey in the blockchain industry and his innovative work at Facings, shaping the future of digital ownership and creative expression. Thanks so much for joining us, Rodrigo.
Thanks for having me on, June. How are you today?
Good. I always like starting off with people's beginnings in crypto. How did you get started? What was the first
Good
crypto?
question. Yeah, I had some friends in college that were also interested in Bitcoin. We basically just stumbled on it in college and thought it was interesting. And we all were focused on entrepreneurial efforts and understanding the pathway to creating startups. And I'd say that was probably back in 2011 that I had my first encounter with Bitcoin. And one of my buddies and mentors from college, he joined the Bitshares community. He did a bunch of research and found Bitshares and then showed it to me. And I really liked what they were doing. So I stuck around and started posting on the forums and following the progress of the project. And the rest is history. I got involved, did what I could to help in an open source decentralized way, because it was just a bunch of enthusiasts on a forum that were discussing strategies, discussing features and how they should be implemented, discussing theories, and it's a really enriching experience. I stuck around and stayed with Bitshares probably till about 2015, and then my interest started to wane, and I had other full-time jobs, and then in 2016 launched, eventually joined that and got re-engaged and just stuck around, eventually leaving my full-time job in 2017, July 2017, and going down the path of exploration into how to create my own company, run my own startup. I saw the launch of EOS was announced and thought this would be a good opportunity. Started going to meetups and talking to people and just networking, and eventually found Adam Zintarski, who would be my co-founder in EOS Detroit, also known today as Detroit Ledger Technologies. We started to specialize in running different chains, eventually got our own bare metal infrastructure, and also realized we wanted to build applications on top of these blockchain networks we were helping to run and support. Started to take our team in that direction, staffing up a development group, and we've been developing applications on top of blockchains. We've done a lot of contract for hire work, and also started our own product called Facings, which I'm currently leading. And yeah, so just fully focused in the space. And I've seen many cycles, seen a lot of interesting things go down, seen the transition from more of a Wild West to something that's trying to be regulated, by seeing the main mass adoption institutionally and otherwise, and the mainstream interest come about. So it's been a really interesting journey to watch all these transformations over time with respect to this new industry. And I'm very happy to be part of it and to have seen the history unfold to date, and excited to see where this goes next.
That's fantastic. And we can get to what you're working on currently, but let's break down your history a little bit more and maybe share some lessons all throughout your journey. Because I remember meeting you really in the Bitshares community. There was this forum called Bitshares Talk. I think I started more in early 2015. I know it was active probably a little bit late 2014, early 2015. But yeah, what got you excited about that? When I guess there's a colleague of yours or he did the research and mentioned Bitshares, what kind of grabbed your attention? It was you were probably still a little bit relatively new, still around the college years. And what was the kind of the biggest reason why you were so excited about Bitshares back then?
Yeah, thanks. Good question. So I would say it came down to a couple things. I really enjoyed the level of discourse on that forum. It was teaching me a lot about economics, a lot about markets and trading and computer science. And I really thought the idea of a stable coin that wasn't an issued IOU was a powerful concept with BitUSD. I thought that was going to be really important in the industry. And we've seen BitShares plant the seed for a lot of that development. It's the spiritual predecessor to Maker and Dai, which is a very popular stablecoin on Ethereum. But beyond that, I was interested in understanding how these technologies could transform society for the better in the sense of creating more positive outcomes for more people. I was pretty disillusioned with the current system in a lot of ways. And I felt that this stuff would be important, an important part of the puzzle for tackling some of society's issues at the time. So from more of my activist background, I was very interested in the potency of the technology and what it could mean for people where the system currently isn't working for them, the economic system, the socioeconomic system, really. Having gone to college in Flint and spending a lot of time in Detroit, I've seen cities where society didn't work for everybody. And I've also spent time in rural communities too, and I've seen their struggles. So for me, this just seemed like something that was very potent and could potentially unlock economic value in new and alternative ways that could help more people. And that was really my main driving force for me to be interested, because I could align my career and my work with my activism. And obviously there's no way we could predict how we'd get to where we are today and all the events that would occur leading up to today. But yeah, it felt very important to me from that perspective, just the potency and the new potential that blockchain technology represented.
Yeah, that's fantastic. A true believer when you talk about activism and the potential to transform society effectively. And it's people don't realize that when you mention MakerDAO, the MakerDAO team started on BitShares. They had the front end, they were using it, and then they eventually transferred over to Ethereum because of the smart contract system and the flexibility they had on it. Do you remember those days? There was a lot of conversations with I think it was Rune and others discussing stable
Yeah, the
coins
main
and
three guys, Rune,
yeah.
Riverhead, and Nikolai Mishugian. Rest in peace, Nikolai. And I remember meeting with those guys in person, or at least Nikolai, and talking about what he was working on and the potential of it, and just getting excited by the energy of the other people in the community. And I met a lot of good friends that I'm still friends with today, included through that experience. Yeah, I do remember those days. I remember they issued the first Maker token on the Bitshares decentralized exchange, which is built right into their protocol. So that would have been the first way to get involved with Maker. Of course, yet another example of being unable to predict how things would go. It was this little pet project on Bitshares, and it turned into a massive project in the industry that represented a huge part of the evolution, I think, especially of stablecoins.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I think, and I just reading all the white papers that they were producing back then on the Maker Die system. I don't know if they've implemented everything that they planned, and I'm sure there were many changes, but it was just great to see. Yeah. And then there was something interesting you did. You actually, I think, toured the U.S. I think there was a interesting journey that you took, kind of promoting BitShares, and so I just remember that from the forums, and you
Yeah, the
met up with, I
BitShares
think,
peer-to-peer road trip. Yeah, a couple
yeah.
guys that were on the forum out of Minnesota, Brandon Lovejoy and another guy that I work with currently, Roadskate. They were friends already, or they met through BitShares Talk. I can't remember, but they essentially decided to go interview people and make a mini documentary. And they came to Detroit on it as one of the stops, and I hosted them and essentially got really inspired by the conversations and the company. And I wasn't too happy with my current job at the time. So I just decided, you know what, I'm going to take a few weeks off. I'm going to join the road trip with these guys and make the pilgrimage to the core devs, which was one of the stops, and just meet people and see new things and see new cities and have good conversations. And that's where I definitely developed my love for tea, because Brandon would prepare tea all the time, multiple times per day, and we'd sit around and have good conversations and talk philosophy and the future of our industry and potential applications and talk about everything. It was a very great experience. Definitely happy I did that, and definitely galvanized my direction, my orientation in the industry. Because after that, I realized, yeah, I'm here for the long haul. I'm going to figure out how to carve out my niche and be a part of this.
Yeah, that's fantastic. We could dig in a little bit more, but let's maybe just share what you learned from the Bitshares system, and then we'll move on to the other networks you've been involved with. So what was the takeaway? Bitshares, it was an early platform for stable coins and a decentralized exchange. But right now, the kind of many other platforms like Uniswap dominate the industry right now. But what were your takeaways? It's a little bit early, 2014, 15, 2016. And is there any kind of lessons learned from that experience that you had there?
Yeah, lots of them. We saw the potential of DEXs for sure, because with a DEX, you were removing middlemen. And that seemed really important because we knew about all of these different weak points in the industry, Mount being the poster child of what could go wrong. And DEXs, in theory, were designed to reduce that risk. We also learned a lot. It was an early protocol. You could think of Bitshares as an alpha to what EOS is today, and what Antelope protocol represents. We didn't have the fancy bandwidth-based resource model that Steem introduced yet. It was fee-based still, of course, which has its own benefits, but makes it harder to scale adoption because now people need tokens to pay fees, which, of course, that's the main experience when you interact on networks like Ethereum today. I got to have my wallet, I got to fund this wallet or have tokens somehow, and then I can start to play. But yeah, with Bitshares, it was also lessons in what could go wrong. It exposed how dependent a project could be on its initial founders. Bitshares has always maintained presence, but I think its relevance has been reduced over time. But there are still people building on that platform today and still using it. So it's still alive and has its own community that has shifted over time. But yeah, it was early. It introduced delegated proof of stake consensus as well, which was an amazing innovation. I think the block times back then were 3 seconds, if I recall, which EOS has optimized down to a half second per block. But that was huge for creating user experiences that feel more real time and not waiting on confirmations and creating delays in the middle of performing actions. So in that respect, but it also demonstrated the need for good marketing too. Bitshares never really had good marketing, and it just didn't go as far as maybe it could have because of that. It wasn't widespread known. It had branding issues, I think. It had its issues, but it was a great prototype of what could be.
Yeah, that's great. Those are great lessons to share. And there's so many architectural decisions on the technology that make big differences. But there's so many that it's hard to even keep track of, whether it's fees on the system and trying to minimize the friction with users when you use a blockchain platform, or just resources, as you mentioned, on EOS. But I don't want to get too technical, but there's so many architectural and design decisions that make a big difference on whether the platform is going to succeed or not. And then secondarily, it's the marketing, as you mentioned. I think part of the reason why you have success in meme coins is this. I think it is this outlet to differentiate through marketing and memes. So it's funny that we even start to see a little bit more marketing, albeit a different kind of marketing with meme coins. Let's move on to Steem and Steemit. And what was your experience there, and any takeaways? Anything interesting you can share?
It was so much fun. That's really what Steem brought, I think, it was just so much fun. We could post about all kinds of topics. It didn't have to be focused on blockchain topics or cryptocurrency topics. People would post about their hobbies, about their life. They'd write stories. They would vent, create blogs about any topic and earn cryptocurrency for that. And it was such an interesting concept. And I think because of that social aspect, similar to Bitshares, it was an application specific blockchain, which means it had the logic for the social media application built into the protocol directly. There's lessons there too. It's not general like Ethereum or EOS where any smart contract can be deployed. It had more rigidity in how the application worked. But yeah, in general, it was the thing that got me to travel internationally or outside of North America, I should say, for the first time. People all over the world, the capital that Steem allowed us to earn was really significant in my life. And I felt I was driven to produce good content when I was active there and try to make things useful. Yeah, so that financial incentive, I think, drove people to try to make great content too. Of course, there were issues in the way the financial system worked. There were exploits or shortcomings that weren't easy to fit because the rewards were directed from inflation based on stake voting. So people with a lot of stake could up their own stuff and farm the token and things like that. And there's a flagging mechanism, but it was only as good as how much stake was behind everyone flagging. So that created interesting dynamics too. And then I think in general, I was already checked out on Steem when the Hive fork happened. But that was the first contentious hard fork of a DPoS blockchain. It was interesting to see how the community was able to successfully fork it and make the fork kind of the more valuable project. I think Hive is what's known more today than Steem. And it comes back to like founders making decisions that led up to that, and also basically someone, Justin Sun in this case, attempting a hostile takeover of a blockchain through purchasing a large amount of stake, and then that not necessarily succeeding, it ending up in a fork. So that was I would say, very interesting thing to behold and watch from the sidelines. And yeah, I would say in general, it was just super interesting. The bandwidth-based rate limiting was very important too, because that allowed us to create user experiences where someone could interact on the platform and use the blockchain without having tokens. They could have their resources delegated. They could start out, they could have these low cost interactions that bootstrap their account and then possibly earn their own tokens through posting and making good content. And so showed us a way that essentially workers could earn, or people performing some sort of work or effort could earn tokens. And in theory, that was making the platform better by putting good content on there, all of which was stored in the chain itself too. So here we had this immutable blogging system basically where anything that I posted on there years and years ago will always continue to perpetuate in now two blockchains, the original Steem and Hive. And I always found that to be really interesting that, you know, this is like a permanent blogging platform. Even if a company went under, this database would, in theory, continue to persist and this content would be immutable.
Yeah, and there's Steem, Hive, the story behind that, as well as the technology, could be a great case study. And I think we could probably do a few episodes on this particular topic. But yeah, that's great that all the lessons that you learned. From a product standpoint, I just have one question there. Do you think that getting paid and through posting is still a viable way for a system to work from a user experience standpoint? If the idea is, hey, for every post I make, if it gets attention and support, I earn that way. It's this direct mechanism of rewards. Do you think that overall user experience makes sense after all the many years of just maybe thinking about blockchain rewarding tokenomics and, hey, being able to get directly rewarded for content? What's your overall impression? Because some people may say, oh yeah, it's a little bit too directly, like it's maybe psychologically that you're just getting paid and you're seeing your posts with a certain monetary value. It may lose this more the social aspect of it. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, that's a good one. Honestly, it all comes down to sources and sinks in an economic system. So we have the source of tokens, the inflation, and they're being allocated out to content creators, and in an optimal system to people producing the best content that's somehow going to create more value than they're being paid, which is very subjective, right? And I think that's where the problem is. If we have inflation, we're allocating inflation out, but we don't have a clear way to sink that value back into the platform, then it creates issues that inflation creates that doesn't have any counterbalance. It also does create malign incentives. If I'm a evil whale with a lot of tokens and I can just milk inflation, I don't necessarily have to create great content or try to increase the value of the platform. Maybe if I'm an aligned whale for a longer, medium, long-term aligned whale, I'm going to understand that and try to use my power wisely. But I think there's always going to be actors in the system that are going to prioritize short-term profits for themselves. So that creates issues. So yeah, I think it's a very tricky thing to truly balance in a sustainable way. However, we still see it exists, and presumably the user base has grown a lot since we were involved. In that respect, I guess the experiment's still ongoing, and I'm not really sure what kind of tokenomic changes have happened, but I tend to like platforms maybe where there's some sort of value create or somehow more restrained or constrained economics. Like peer tipping doesn't seem to fully work too, because most people are going to say, why would I pay for something when it's free? I can already access it for free. Sure, they might tip out of altruism or the good of their heart, but that's not going to create very sticky economics in my mind. And yeah, when we're just pointing the fire hose of inflation and spraying it everywhere, that doesn't seem to work great either. So I don't really know the best way to balance a social app. I haven't put a whole lot of thought into that lately. I think it's well worth continuing experimentation in. But yeah, and you know what Voice was trying to do, which totally took a pivot and then shut down. It's crazy. Hundreds of millions of dollars in investment, and you still can't launch a MVP. They were trying to basically make it so that by purchasing visibility on the platform, that would drive the tokenomic system. So more kind of akin to the way advertising online works today in some respects, but baked into the platform. And with enough of a network effect, that could possibly work too. But I don't think it's the full answer. And they had to focus on trying to eliminate bots, which never went anywhere because the T craze happened and they're like, oh, we're going to just hard pivot to NFTs. And then, I don't know, a year and a half or something later, they just closed up shop. So must have burned through that money really quick. But yeah, I'm pretty sure they had a few hundred million and still didn't make it. So money isn't everything in startups.
Yeah, that's another good lesson. So I guess it's not conclusive yet. Hive is still going fairly strong, but I think, like you mentioned, the tokenomics is such an important part of it that you have to get that right. How do you incentivize the highest quality content? And if that's the case, regardless of maybe the user experience, I think it could be sustainable and it could work. So I think that's a great point. So let's move on to EOS then, and Telos and just this alternative smart contract platform system. What has been your experience? You've worked a lot on the infrastructure side, but just being part of this community, and what are your lessons and takeaways from everything you've worked on and currently work on?
Yeah, thanks, June. It seems like with every new protocol from Bitshares to Steem and Steem to EOS, the magnitude has grown. That's always been interesting. More people, more value in the system in general. So we've seen this great growth in overall users and community. In Antelope, which is the new name for the EOS.io protocol, we've seen that growth happen in a slightly different way, not necessarily all concentrated on one network, but the protocol launching new networks, creating new communities. And there's many blockchains that exist using that protocol tweaked in different ways. And what they did with Antelope that I really make it highly modular and by implementing the system itself as smart contracts that enabled blockchains to new blockchains using Antelope to easily tweak the parameters and tune them and change the way inflation works and change the way voting works and change the way and perform experiments. So we've seen a ton of experimentation in Antelope, and we've seen corporate-backed Antelope chains like Wax that have had good success. We've seen EOS reinvent itself in multiple different ways, especially through the introduction of the ENF. And I think that was a great development in general for the industry because the E has actually focused on fundamentals like core development that we needed and pushed forward amazing features and made sure the protocol continued to be developed. See interesting, more like yield farming type stuff on EOS mainnet and the way its consensus has worked out. And we see EVMs being deployed in smart contracts and that sort of bridging and optionality created for developers. Someone who knows Solidity and has contracts can now integrate or move parts of their or the whole application over to these EVMs. There's just been so much interesting stuff that's happened. And the power up too, where your tokens don't represent resources anymore. You rent the resources from the system for a nominal fee. So even moving away from the stake-based resources that Steem introduced and EOS originally had to pay microtransactions and get the resources you need to push your transactions through. And when I'm saying microtransactions, I'm saying, a few hundredths of an EOS or maybe 10, 20 hundredths of an EOS. So very small amounts of money as far as fees go. But yeah, a return to fees in a sense has happened for some of these networks. So it's all super interesting. Jury's still out. My whole thing is we get people coming to us trying to build things. We analyze if we can be assistants or try to give them good advice, make recommendations on which network we think would be good for their application based on what they're trying to do, and then propose the plan to build prototypes and MVPs and get there. We've got some contracts like that underway, which are very exciting. Wish I could talk more about some of the things we're doing, but they'll be out there in the wild soon enough. And yeah, there's so much going on. I can't even keep track of it all anymore. I used to be able to keep more of a pulse on everything, but that's definitely not possible anymore. So I rely on the people around me to help me stay informed too. If we all use our eyes together and talk regularly on what we're seeing or observing. One thing I'm excited about with Facings is we are taking a sort of blockchain agnostic approach. So we're focused on integrating antelope blockchains into our core platform MVP, but we want to be able to tap into other markets and allow applications to exist in multiple chains integrated, at least NFT powered applications. So from that perspective, we've been very interested in enabling that. And we see that demand from people coming to us seeking development assistance. Hey, this blockchain's hot right now. Is there some way we can incorporate that? And I never want to compromise the design of their app just to put their finger as many pies as possible. I think that's a poor approach too. But we're seeing these multi-chain applications in many cases start to work out or have more legs than the ones that are restricted to one chain. So that is an interesting development. Definitely looking forward to seeing how things progress on that front too. But yeah, like we're just focused heads down on Facings, making sure we get an app out sooner than later, really enjoying the progress we've made and looking forward to sharing it with the world. But yeah, the team's really focused. That's another thing, being able to tune out noise and focus on what you need to is really important. And there can be a lot of stimulus and noise in this industry. So figuring out what deserves your attention the most or what's the most important and being able to tune out noise is, I think, an important skill I've learned along the way too. That's got to be balanced. If you get too heads down and too tuned out, then people will wonder if you're still there. So I've experienced that too. But yeah, just focused on the fundamentals, focused on building, excited about the evolution of things, hoping the regulation goes the right way and we're on the right side of history. Being based in the US creates additional concerns the way things are being discussed, but I'm hopeful that the US will be able to figure out a good path forward that allows our industry to really still operate here without being completely oppressed. So I'm cautiously optimistic, but we'll have to see how this shakes out.
Okay. Yeah, thanks so much. So, and I guess we could just get into a little bit more just to maybe end this interview. What is your kind of current, you said you were building an MVP. What is the product? What are the kind of main use applications with Facings? I know it is an NFT, maybe platform or tool set. How do you describe it?
Yeah, that's Good question. So essentially, what we're doing is building an abstraction layer over blockchain networks that allow teams or people to collaborate on NFT launches. There's a lot of things that go into a good NFT launch. And of course, they take all different shapes and sizes, but there's usually a lot of media and a lot of content like text and otherwise that you have to manage. You got to make sure that you get this right, because when you create the NFT, it's immutable, it's permanent on chain. So there's a lot, I think, that goes into making sure the quality is great up front. But also, if you're launching a NFT collection at scale and you've got thousands of different pieces of art per se, if it's some collectible set or some game set, and these NFTs have to have semantic meaning. They have to do things in a game or be able to be combined through crafting or opened out of packs or all of these different transformations that they can go through. It's a lot to handle. It's a lot if your focus is games, for you to have to become an NFT expert and re-roll your own stuff, and it's untenable, and it creates a lot of risk for the project that you're going to do something wrong just because you might not have the experience. Or maybe, again, your focus is on games, but you're not a blockchain expert, but now you need to be an expert in resource models, and you have to create custom scripts to set up your collection on chain, which could be a lot of different actions, could be hundreds of different actions or thousands, the shape and size of your NFT collection. And maybe you got to be able to evaluate smart contracts or implement your own custom smart contracts too. So there's all this overhead, and our focus is making it so creators can focus on what they're doing and don't need to be experts in the rest. Basically, you can draft your NFT collection on our platform with your team. You can review that everything's good. You can push it out to test nets. You can reproduce that whole same test net launch on the main net when you're ready. But you can also make those edits before you make these things permanent, instead of just go create it on chain and hope you got it right the first time. And beyond that, you don't have to understand the resource model or how it works. We abstract that from you. And we also provide the sales infrastructure you need to sell your NFTs using credit cards. So in pick and mix functionality, I want my NFTs in packs. I want my NFTs to be craftable. I want my NFTs to be redeemable for physical goods. I want my NFTs to do X, Y, and Z. We're going to provide standard functionality and templates for that stuff, so folks don't have to handle or glue it together. And what makes us different from the current launchers out there is because we're more of a traditional, almost SaaS type platform that you can come use. You don't have to be a blockchain expert to do something sophisticated with us. Whereas with a lot of the other platforms, you got to learn a lot. You got to be a blockchain expert. You got to get tokens. You got to know how to estimate resource costs. You got to know how to model everything. We're just going to tell you it's going to cost this much to launch your platform. Do you want to, or your collection? Do you want to pay that? If you pay it, then our system will do all the work for you. So we're an abstraction layer on top of blockchain networks that performs workloads on behalf of our customers. And I think that's a really important thing we need. We need the glue to the mainstream. We need the ability to abstract away big on-chain workloads and have a bulletproof platform that can perform those with highest degree of quality and efficiency. And that's what we're building. So there's a lot of collection management platforms out there, but I think they stop a little short of what we're doing.
Yeah, I think that you described it well. If you guys are wanting to create entities, just go check out Rodrigo and Facings. So really appreciate it, sharing your journey, sharing insights as an entrepreneur and everything that's going on. And we'll have you back hopefully soon so you could give us updates. So thanks so much. I really appreciate it. And yeah, good luck with everything in the future. And we'll have you back.
Thank you, June. It's been wonderful catching up with you. I really appreciate the thoughtful questions and being invited on the show, and really looking forward to catching up with you and learning more about Bitcash too.
Sounds good.
So thank you so much.
Thanks, Rodrigo.
Thank you. Have a good day.